and welcome to this episode 7 of the Amateur Hour podcast. My name is Adam Thomas. Today we're going to talk briefly about some video game news. I'm going to be giving my opinion of E3, its past, present, and future. We're going to talk a little more about my thoughts on Kingdom Come Deliverance, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the anime that I've been watching recently. Get ready to listen to some assholes talk about random crap on the internet. So with everything that's been going on lately with E3, I wanted to talk a little bit about the trade show, my opinions, memories, and what I think it's got in store for the future. For those of you who don't know, E3 is the trade show for the video game industry. It started in 1995, and it really grew out of the discontent that the video game industry had with the Consumer Electronics Show with CES. Very long story short, the CES didn't treat the video game industry as a real trade partner, as an important part of the Consumer Electronics Show. Tom Kalinske, CEO of Sega of America, kind of summed up the problems, in my opinion, when he described the 1991 Consumer Electronics Show. Basically, CES was always putting video game industry in the back of the Consumer Electronics Show, and in 1991 they actually pushed the video game industry outside of the building, setting them up in tents, which of course that year it rained, and that rain got into the new Sega Genesis and caused all kinds of problems. So there was this running discontent between the video game industry and the Consumer Electronics Show, which led them to basically form their own trade show so that they could show their wares without the need for a third party. They could have something that was more precise to the needs of the video game industry. Now, to understand E3 today and what it could possibly become in the future, you have to understand what it was in the past. When E3 started, it was purely a trade show, like any other trade show. It was for industry insiders to get together, to get with the press, to get with their customers, which would be retailers and wholesalers, and present to them their products and explain to these businesses why they should carry their products. For major players in the industry, this was their chance to make major announcements covered by the press and to speak directly with their customers, which would be the retailers and wholesalers, as to why they, for example, should carry their new system or make big investments into carrying their products. For other non-console makers, it was a chance for publishers to show off their wares to both retailers, interested parties, and of course the console makers to possibly get licenses or have their licensing fees reduced. And of course the entire event was for a chance for all of these individuals to get together, to network, and for industry insiders to make contacts or just catch up with friends and rivals. At the time, and really for a long time, E3 was not concerned with the public. It wasn't an open to the public event. Yes, there were journalists there covering it, but it was mostly from the views of insiders. People like stockholders, retailers, trade insiders. The general gaming public was not really the focus of E3 for a very long time. I'm not exactly sure when I became aware of E3. It would have been the very late 90s, early 2000s, but I can still remember staying up late, watching Tech TV and later G4, reading through Game Pro magazine and other gaming magazines, trying to get every bit of information that I could that was coming from E3. E3 for us nerds was sort of like the Super Bowl, except it was a week long and you didn't actually get to watch it, you just read about it or heard about it from elsewhere. And that's the way E3 continued for a long time. Now, for a while there, it got more and more about the speaking directly to the public and less about it being a purely trade show. Entertainment also became larger and larger with E3, and there were a few times that the general public in very limited numbers was allowed into E3. All of that started to really change with YouTube and with the internet becoming commonplace. The kind of niche coverage that E3 used to get from places like G4 and the larger gaming magazines started to be supplanted by both more traditional media and your homegrown media from, like, say, YouTubers. How the internet being commonplace and how YouTube has changed the way the video game industry views itself cannot be overstated. Before, as I said, E3 was purely a trade show. Now it had moved towards targeting the public more and more, and finally, with channels other than something such as E3 being covered through the traditional media and even non-traditional media, now publishing companies and major game developers and even console developers could speak to their audience directly without the need for these middlemen. It wasn't long into the modern E3 era that Nintendo pulled from E3 and started releasing their largest press releases directly to the consumer through Nintendo Direct. Sony followed shortly after, and to this day, Microsoft is the only of the three major console developers, that have an E3 presence of any considerable amount. Major press releases are now handled directly through Sony and Nintendo, or at other video game trade shows which are arguably less famous. It really hasn't helped matters that E3 has been terribly run the past few years. A while back, E3 had a massive data breach which released the personal information of a lot of attendees. This led to journalists and YouTubers being doxxed and their personal information being taken. As you can imagine, this caused a big headache, and no one has been all that trusting of E3 ever since. This led to its first big problem for this year's E3. Another big blow to E3 came when Jeff Keighley said that he would not be attending. Now, Jeff Keighley's been covering E3 almost from the beginning, so him deciding not to go has been a major blow to E3. Finally, E3 has lost its creative director, I Am 8-Bit, just 3 months before the actual trade show itself. Further, with less and less developers and less console carriers wanting to go to E3, E3 announced that they were, in a way, changing their focus, that they were going to be more focused on what they called influencer events, and they were going to use Qtainment, which was kind of not well defined, but basically if you would be standing in line for some kind of event, whether it be a gaming demo or a presentation, there would be this kind of information. It would be marketing. It would basically be commercials while you stood in line. This had an adverse effect on both YouTubers and journalists wanting to attend. Since the industry has been moving and pulling out of E3, E3 seems to have, without really consulting the people, wanting to push the journalists, the YouTubers, and the developers and industry insiders themselves as the focus of E3 rather than it be purely a trade show. Now, what do I think of this? I think if handled properly, it could be the future of E3. But you can't just announce that you're changing the focus of what used to be purely a trade show, then sort of morphed into kind of a trade show, kind of a consumer retailer information dump, to finally being a kind of a trade show, kind of an information announcement forum, to wanting it to be a weird hybrid of a meet and greet with industry insiders, YouTubers, journalists. E3 doesn't know what it wants to be when it grows up. It's little wonder that other shows and conventions like PAX are growing while E3 is shrinking. How do I personally think of E3? And obviously I won't be attending. I've never gone to E3. But if it continues like it is now, I don't think that E3 has a future. It has to change. I do like what E3 is trying to kind of become, but just dumping responsibility for the show off on what they call influencers is not the way. E3 should have quietly approached some of the YouTubers and said, look, we're wanting to change this more into a consumer-based function. That way, your influencers would have known what they were getting into. If they're going to be the stars of the show, so to speak, and we're going to start moving away from retailers meeting and deciding what they're going to carry in their stores, to talking directly to the consumer and having these influencers as the show themselves, this should have been communicated and planned months, if not years, multiple years in advance. If handled properly, I think this could be a savior of E3. E3 can no longer depend on bringing in purely industry insiders and just being a trade show anymore. It's just not going to work. There's too much public interest and not enough incentive for major developers, both game and console developers, to take on the expense of setting up these massive displays and having these huge press releases at E3 when they can more simply, cheaply, and effectively just release a YouTube video. So obviously there has to be changes at E3, but just dumping it on the heads of YouTubers and influencers and expecting them to carry the trade show for you is not going to work. I think what E3 should do is slowly change from being purely a trade show into being a more general convention. Still have the trade show elements, still have a stage where industry insiders and people within the industry can get up on stage and make their press releases and speak directly to their customers, whether they be retailers or directly to the consumers, but also have time set aside for normal everyday consumers to get to meet and greet with industry insiders and with influencers like people on YouTube, and keep these two things very separate. For example, when Angry Joe went to E3, he noted he didn't want to speak to his fans there. Not because he didn't want to talk to his fans, he's always happy to talk to his fans, but he was there working. He had meetings to get to, he had shows to get to, he had interviews to conduct, he had to get time to shoot his videos and get them uploaded while attending E3. I can't even imagine that type of hectic schedule. So keep these things separate so that if you do have industry announcements going on, meetings going on, there is still separate time for that, and then have days that people can set up and meet and greet and get to meet their fans, and their fans can get to meet YouTubers or software developers or gaming people and get in that real personal feeling with the industry they love so much. I think that's the future of E3, and I think if they handle it right, they could attract people in the influencers that they're looking to have at the show, get the industry back invested into E3, not so much as a purely trade show, but as a chance to both have a big stage to make their presentations on, if they choose to, but also the chance to get that raw feedback from their fans. And frankly, to turn some of their workers into superstars. Everyone knows Hideo Kojima. Everybody knows about Metal Gear Solid. Everybody knows some of these industry insiders. And to have these people in the general public and to put lesser known figures out into the general public to get raw public feedback and frankly to make a little money on the side and bring fame to their studios, it would just be a net positive. Also with YouTubers, if you have YouTubers there covering in their media role, in their journalist role on some days, then giving them time to interact with the general public on others, it would almost kill two birds with one stone. But keep these schedules separate so that they're not running everywhere and they're happy to attend the event. So what do I think of E3? Do I think it has a future? As it's going now, no. It cannot continue on as a trade show. It cannot just unilaterally change itself and expect its guests to be the entertainment, and it cannot continue to have data breaches and other embarrassing failures. How would I save E3? Well, I would turn E3 from what it is now into both a trade show and a general convention. I don't think that it can survive in either by itself. I don't think that E3 can survive continuing to be purely a trade show, especially since only one of the major console developers is even going to be there, and how much longer Microsoft will continue to support E3 is somewhat questionable. And I don't think it can survive purely as just another video gaming convention. It does need to kind of be both. And I think the best way to go about this would be, for one, to speak with the people that it intends to make the stars of the show. Both keep it a trade show to some respect where industry insiders can come, they can have press coverage, they can make their releases on a grand scale, but also have influencers there to both cover those events and interact with the public in general. And have these two parts of the convention, these two parts of the show, scheduled in a way so that you're not conflicting with yourself. You don't have your influencers, your journalists, your YouTubers running around desperately trying to get to these press releases while at the same time dealing with their fans. At the same time, allow fans to come in to meet with these people, but make sure that they understand that when they're quote-unquote on stage, that they're going to be on stage, and that they understand everything that's involved with it. This entire wanting to unilaterally and, in a way, secretively change the aim of E3 was just not fair. And it has left a bad taste in the mouths of some of the people that you're trying to court. You can't have your personal data stolen and then going to E3 thinking that you're going to be fulfilling the job as a journalist just to find out that they want you to suddenly carry their show for them. That's just not fair. E3 is going to have to restructure itself. It's going to have to mend some bridges, and it's going to have to create this kind of hybrid of both being a place where insiders want to go to show off their wares and interact with the public in general. I think that's the future of E3. It's going to take a very special group of people to reorientate E3 into this kind of hodgepodge where a little bit of everybody comes in. I don't know how they're going to do that. I don't know how they're going to both ensure that people feel comfortable giving them their personal information so they can attend, knowing that it will be guarded, while at the same time courting both industry insiders, journalists, YouTubers, and key parts of the general public to all come in and kind of be put in this pot and mesh together well. I don't envy that task, but honestly, I think that is the only way E3 can continue forward. I honestly do not believe that they can continue on as a trade show. That's become painfully clear with the departure of Nintendo and Sony. At the same time, if they drop the trade show angle, they would just be lost in the sea of all the other conventions. And there are so many video game conventions out there. Would they be able to ride on their name for a while? Yeah, sure, people would remember E3 well. They have been around since 1995, so there would be that. But honestly, there are other purely consumer video gaming conventions that would do a better job and that have more experience for that. So I don't think that's the way forward either. I think becoming this both a trade show for industry insiders for certain days and open to the general public on other days is really the way to go. It just has to be scheduled and handled really well. And if you're going to slowly start changing things away from it being purely about the industry itself and start expanding it out to where your influencers, your game developers, your YouTubers are going to be the stars of the show, you have to clearly communicate that so that people can be aware and be made ready for that. I think that is the way of the future. If they get people that really know what they're doing, get some convention people in there while retaining people with industry contacts in there, sitting down really hammering out what this new type of show is going to look like, I think it could be a huge, huge success. I think it could even draw back in people like Sony and Nintendo, because ultimately a game designer and a console designer has to meet the needs and the desires of the people they are wanting to sell these to the general consumer. And what better way to get feedback would be to actually talk with these people face to face, and even if it's for a minute or two, hear what they have to say in an autograph signing. Hear their feedback directly from the consumer itself. I think that that would be a draw, and to have all these other influencers out there and give the general public the opportunity to interact with their favorite game developer, with their favorite YouTube personality, perhaps even with some of the journalists that have covered it, I think that would also be a big draw for consumers to come in to attend the show and to also have other people come in and they themselves get their time in the spotlight, both as a developer, software developer, as a YouTuber, as an influencer. They could be bringing these people in and everyone could leave happy. So I don't know about anybody else, but I'm starting to get excited about the new PS5 coming out. I don't usually get consoles as soon as they come out. I usually wait till their second iteration. With the PlayStation 3, I waited till the slim model. The PlayStation 2, I waited a year and a half before I got the system. Part of that's just economical. Prices come down some after launch, and you don't have to deal with all the scalpers buying up all of the inventory and then charging an outrageous amount for the system. The other reason is to get it because inevitably when a system's released, it has some problems that needed to be ironed out. Not so much with the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, but certainly with the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 launch systems admittedly did have some problems, just nowhere near as much as the launch Xbox 360s. So far, I've made my comments on the PS5 clear, the things that I'm hoping for, but I recently found this article on MSN that I found interesting. It says Sony is releasing 2 PS models. The base PS5 is 9 teraflops. The other one is top of the line, complete with XSX Top Dog. Now, I'm hoping that means maybe Sony somehow heard what I had to say and that they are indeed launching 2 versions of the PS5. One that's an economy model, and that is to really push out to where if you just want something to play with your friends on, you're not going for top of the line, you're not going for full backwards compatibility, and the other one being the premium system that'll really push everything to its limits and that will frankly have backwards compatibility going all the way back to PS1. I'm really, really hoping that's the case. I'm hoping this isn't just a slight upgrade in the processing power and memory and maybe storage capacity. I'm really hoping that the PlayStation 5 Pro, if they choose to continue the naming scheme, will have real backwards compatibility. It would be okay if their baseline PS5 has a 500. It would be better if it had a 1 terabyte solid state drive and that's it, but I'm hoping that this Pro model will have a much larger hard drive because frankly 500 and really 1 terabyte of storage is going to be nothing. You're talking about the vanilla install of Final Fantasy VII Remake being 100 gigs. What are PS5 games going to be at the end? I mean, it also says in this article that Sony and Microsoft will be doing a double launch of both versions of their consoles, so if the naming scheme holds steady, it'll be the Xbox Series X and the Xbox Series X, and the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro, both double launching. And the article also says that, according to their insider, which is where they're getting all this information, is that the aim is to have these consoles last the entire 7-year generation cycle as opposed to having the mid-generation refresh. That would be great if it's the case. I just don't see how it can be the case, especially with the storage capacity of these systems being so low. We don't know what the new Xbox storage capacity is, but if we assume that it's around 500 to a terabyte, just like the PlayStation 5 is reported to be, then that's clearly not going to be enough. There's going to have to be, at the very least, some kind of expansion or new system with higher storage capacity. Chances are we're looking at another mid-generation refresh, but if that's the case, it sucks. Who knows? Maybe they'll surprise me and release a PlayStation 5 with a large storage space. Maybe they'll put in 2 drives, as I suggested, a solid-state drive and a traditional drive for larger storage. Perhaps they'll put in some kind of hybrid drive that'll have maybe 2 terabytes of regular storage and then 500 gigs or a terabyte of solid state storage. So games that you play on a regular basis or games that require a lot of loading can be moved to the solid state drive, and then games that don't require a lot of loading and all of your system updates and saved games and other things that can be on a slower drive can be put on the more traditional drive or the more traditional portion of a hybrid drive. Who knows? All I can say is that I hope that this upcoming PlayStation 5 Pro will have full backwards compatibility and will have more options for storage space, because clearly 500 gigs and 1 terabyte is going to be nowhere near enough, especially if you're downloading a lot of your games and not using physical game media. And even if you're using physical media, games these days have so many updates that the updates can be larger even than the game itself, so it's not really saving that much. These drives have to be larger. 500 and 1 terabyte aren't enough. Let's have full backwards compatibility on the Pro, and let's hope that there's no mid-generation refresh, or if it is, it'll be largely storage capacity based, and that can be upgraded with the old systems to keep pace. So, a while back I gave some quick impressions of what I thought of Kingdom Come Deliverance after playing it for a few hours. I've managed to put a few more hours into it, get a little further in the story and experience more of the game, and I have very mixed feelings about this game. It's clearly a title that was not really polished very well. There's a lot of bugs in it. None of them are game breaking, none of them are, the game crashing or stuff just not working. But there are a lot of things in it that just don't work very well. And the combat system is just something maybe it's just me, but after taking the tutorial a couple of times, there are just elements in the game that I just do not understand. I don't really get the battle system is very complicated and very needlessly complicated in my humble opinion. When I have played through the tutorial, I've had several battles, some of I've won, some I've lost, and I can't tell you with any certainty why I won some and why I lost others. I just do not understand the battle system, and I have played video games for a very long time. I think that the game has moments of brilliance. The story is pretty good in my opinion. I think that the main character is a little bland, but he's sort of supposed to represent you in a way, so in that I'm giving it a little bit of a pass. I like the world. There are times when I'll stop and look at a village or look at some farms or more of the medieval setting and just think to myself, wow, that's beautiful, that's interesting. It's far better in some ways than even Skyrim was. But there are other times that I'm playing the game that just drives me crazy. I have very mixed feelings about the game. I think they could have done much, much better. I think if they would have simplified some of these systems, it would have been a much more enjoyable experience. Take, for example, lockpicking. Bethesda, for all of its failures, did a good job with its lock-picking mechanic. It works in a way so that you're never quite sure exactly precisely how to do it, but there's enough in there that it's a simple enough system to understand. It's difficult enough that it can be challenging, but not so difficult that you can't eventually get it and work yourself through it. The lock-picking system in Kingdom Come Deliverance, I still do not understand. I have sat down and tried it over and over and over and over. I get vaguely what they were going for, but just getting it to work and understanding exactly how to beat the mini game and unlock something is maddening. The same thing with the battle system. I understand that sort of what they were trying to go for, to really give you this feel of how complicated combat can be, but at the same time, it's a video game. If I wanted to understand what it's like to actually be in a sword fight, I could go out and join an SCA event or a sword fighting or combat sport. To get it into a video game, I want a simpler system, and I cannot tell you exactly how it works. The only way I have found to consistently win a fight is to do one of two things. One, pick a single opponent, get into a one-on-one engagement, beat them down against a tree or a wall or something, and just have more stamina than them. Just attack, 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 land a hit, fall back, regenerate your stamina, get them into a similar situation, attack, 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 till you run their stamina out, get a hit in, repeat until you defeat your opponent. Or if you're fighting an opponent that you can't do that with, or heaven forbid you're fighting multiple opponents, find a horse, get on the horse, and do drive-bys. Ride by, hit them, turn around, ride by, hit them, and just keep making these passes until eventually they die. Those have been the only ways I have found to consistently emerge victorious in a battle, and it's such a shame. The game can be very fun and very brilliant at times, and other times it feels like work. I haven't decided if I'm going to continue playing the game or not. I've started another game kind of on the side, and I'm debating whether or not just to fully switch to that game or to continue playing Kingdom Come Deliverance. It's a shame. I want to know what happens to the main character. I want to know what happens with the story, but in a lot of ways I don't want to play the game to find out. At the same time, I'll sit down with it, I'll play it for an hour, I'll have a lot of fun. Other times I'll sit down with it and I'll get so disgusted after 15 minutes that I throw it down and just go back to doing something else. If you have the time, and if you can get it for cheap enough, I would suggest the game with the caveat of this is a game that's going to take you a long time to play. It's going to have aggravating mechanics that you're going to have to overcome. The tutorials don't do a very good job at all of teaching you any of this stuff. So be ready to fail a lot. Now, if you're in a hurry, this is not the game for you, because even with the time that I have to put into it here and there, I feel rushed every time I turn it on, and it seems like it takes forever in some instances to do even the simplest thing. So if you're in a rush, this might not be the game for you. If you can get it for cheap, you got plenty of time on your hands, you don't mind what I think are overly complicated systems, then give it a shot. If not, then steer clear of it unless you can get it for really, really cheap. I hate to say that. I had a lot of hopes for this game, and there are parts of it that I think are absolutely, totally brilliant, but it is tarnished by overly complicated gameplay, tutorials that don't teach you very well, mechanics that I frankly cannot understand, and the aggravation going with that just does not let me give this game a good rating. I'm not going to fully review it here, but if I were pinned down and said, hey, what do you give this game so far? I would give it a 4.5 or a 5. It's a decent enough game. It has moments of brilliance, but it cannot raise above just your average game. That's a shame, because if you take the bad parts and you average it together with the good parts, I would say you come out to a average game. Not totally bad, not totally good, but just your average run-in-the-middle game. I can't give Kingdom Come Deliverance any higher a rating than that. It is a good average game. Go out and get it if you've got time enough to put into it. Skip it if you don't. So I finally wanted to talk about that anime that I've mentioned like 800 times but never gotten the chance to actually talk about. The anime that I wanted to talk about that I've recently finished watching is the Fruits Basket remake. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why are you watching an anime that's aimed at girls? Well, I'm a fan of pretty much all anime. There's very little anime that I'm just like, I don't want to watch that at all. Some people have called me a little bit picky, but all things considered, I give pretty much anything a chance. I watched the original Fruits Basket. It was okay. There was funny bits in it, but it never really grabbed me. So when I was asked to watch the new Fruits Basket, I kind of rolled my eyes, but I said, hey, sure, yeah, I'll give it a chance. So I sat down and watched it, and it grabbed me almost from the beginning. So what can I say about the Fruits Basket remake? Well, the animation has taken a big step up, but that's to be expected. The characters are the same, more or less, that you knew in the old one. It's just you get a lot more time with them, and the story is more or less the same, but again, you get a lot more time to build the story, and they're going to, from what I understand, continue the anime on all the way up to where it ends in the manga. So we'll actually get a complete story this time instead of just the kind of half story that we got with the original Fruits Basket. Now, the story is still pretty much the same, but the extra time that you get makes a big difference. Before, in the original anime, one of the things that really kept me from getting invested was most of the characters I really didn't care about. They came in, you got to see them for a few minutes, they did their little funny joke or raised the tension or whatever they were supposed to do, and that was it. That was all they did. With the remake, you really get to know the characters better. You really get more invested with them, emotionally invested with them, and that helps quite a lot. I honestly don't remember Toro's friends that much from the original anime. I knew they were there, but they never made much of an impression on me. They were just sort of background characters. And when I resaw them in the remake, I didn't remember that much about them. By the end of season 1 of the remake, I actually cared about her friends. These are not even secondary characters in the original. In the new remake, they're not primary characters, but they're very much secondary characters, and my personal opinion is I grew to like them. I grew to like her two friends, and honestly, I don't know if they could have a long series, but I believe they could have their own spin-off series, and I think it would be pretty good. I very much enjoyed them. I wanted to see more of them. There were characters in the remake that were not in the original or have been changed somewhat. That helped some with getting to know these characters more. The biggest thing that the remake has going for it is that you get more emotionally invested with the characters because honestly, you spend more time with them. Now, there were a few things in the old one that I thought were better. There were a few jokes that I honestly missed in the remake. I don't know if they took them out because they didn't think they were funny or they weren't in the manga or what the deal was, but two jokes in particular that were in the old one that I sorely missed. One of them was the towel bit, and I won't go much more into that. The other one was, "My love, my shirt!" And I'm sure if you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. I do have one little bit of a funny story with the new remake of Fruits Basket. This was an anime that I got to sit down and watch the first episode with my family. Now, my family's not big into anime. My mom has seen a few things here and there. Think of her as your very much Studio Ghibli type of anime fan. Family-oriented, very simple anime. My brother was there. He is also an anime fan, not quite as to my level, but he's seen a few things. As a kid, he was a big fan of Naruto growing up some. He's seen When They Cry, and I know it's not quite an anime, but like the Netflix Castlevania series, and another few things here and there that he's seen. It was very funny when we were watching the first episode of it. My mom was kind of lost, not understanding why the cute boys were turning into animals, and my brother, I'll never forget that, he turns and looks at me and goes, "Why is everything so sparkly?" I got to go, "Congratulations, son, you're watching a girl's anime." So that was just a funny bit that I found entertaining. All in all, Fruits Basket remake, I very much enjoyed it. It grabbed me far more than the original. I now am going to have to go watch something like Attack on Titan as a chaser. I can only take so much cutesy-wootsy girl-focused anime stuff. But all in all, it was funny. The characters grabbed me a lot more than the original. I felt invested into it. It was kind of an eye-opening, too, with girls' anime. I've watched several anime that's been targeted to girls. One of the things that I noticed is that despite what Hollywood is trying to do with having these extremely strong, independent female characters, in the anime that I've watched, for example, Toro, she's not a strong, independent character. She is a strong character, but she's not physically strong. She's not running around punching out, guys 4 times her size. She's an emotionally strong character. She has managed to go through tremendous tragedy and persevere. Toro's greatest strength, her superpower, is that it seems like she's always in the right place at the right time and always has the right thing to say or do. I think this is one thing that people confuse in modern media. Women can be strong, and in a lot of ways stronger than men in certain ways. One way that Toro does it so well is to be emotionally grounded. You look at someone like Kyo that wants to literally fight his way out of all of his problems. He wants to solve his problems by either punching it or just pulling a macho, whatever, and writing it off. Toro is stronger than him, not physically, but in her ability to confront emotions, to understand them, and to say and do the right thing. Now, in the anime, it is overplayed some. There are some times where I'm watching it, and I did roll my eyes going, oh my god, nobody's that perfect. But it is a fantasy. It's just a fantasy in another way. And I think in a lot of ways it's a very constructive fantasy. It's about taking these tragedies, taking these things, and fixing them. You can't bring someone back, but you can remember them, and you can use that to push yourself forward instead of just falling down and collapsing. And I think that's a very important message. I would say that this is a show that is primarily aimed at girls, but it is also a healing show. It is a show of people coming together and healing their emotional problems. There's another show that I think that does that very well. That is My Roommate is a Cat. If you're looking for a show kind of in the same vein where it's just cute and it's all about healing your emotional problems and having a positive message, watch that show as well. But as far as the Fruits Basket remake, I have to say that it is a good show. It is in a lot of ways much better than the original, aside from a couple of jokes in the original that I really miss not being in the remake. I would put Fruits Basket remake high on my list. I would suggest it to a lot of people. It is for me at least an 8, maybe even an 8.5. I can't quite give it a 9 or higher. It is an 8, a good strong 8. It is a very good show. I would suggest it to anybody that wants a good show to sit and watch. If you're totally about action, you're totally about gore or horror, and you're not interested in a cutesy-wootsy drama that has some good story in it, then it's not for you. If you only like Attack on Titan or similar shows, then skip this one. But if you don't mind sitting down and watching something that's got some drama, that's got some comedy, that's got some good old emotional healing in it, then give this show a shot. I don't think that you'll be disappointed. There was one more anime that I watched recently that I can't give quite such a high praise to. I recently sat down and watched Gridman. It's a mecha show. Now, I'm a big fan of mechs. I'm a big mecha fan, but for some reason, I'm not a big anime mecha fan. Most mecha anime just isn't very good to me. There's a few here and there, but I'm a BattleTech fan. I love the tabletop game. I love the BattleTech universe, and maybe that clouded my judgment as far as Japanese mecha go. I watched Robotech. I know it's the bastardized version of Macross, but growing up I didn't know that. I enjoyed that. But ever since then, there's been a few here and there, and honestly, Gridman is not the next big mecha show for me. I watched it, I thought it was okay. One of the big plus sides to the show that I really liked, and this is odd for me, I liked that it was not a harem. I liked that there were relationships going on beyond